Okay, it looks like all of our participants are now on the call. Again, I'm WVEA President Dale Lee, and welcome to the WVEA's Tele-Town Hall on the fall school term. Joining us today will be West Virginia State Superintendent of Schools Clayton Birch. Before we get started, let me go over a few housekeeping details. First of all, we are live, so you may hear some background noise and conversations as we work through the call logistics here at the WVEA office. Superintendent Birch and I will have a few opening comments, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions. We have a time limit of approximately 1 hour for this call, so you will be limited to one question. So everyone who wants to speak has the opportunity to be heard. In order to ask a question, press 0 on your telephone keypad at any time, and one of our staff will be waiting to help you with the process. Someone will come on and ask your name, county, and the topic of your question. You will then be placed in the queue. When it is time for your question, I will call on you and unmute your phone so that you can talk. If during the town hall your question was not answered or you wish to make a comment, there will be a voicemail option at the end of the call, so hang on until the end and leave your question. We will go through them, transcribe them, and make sure that they get to Superintendent Birch. So let's get started. As you know, WVEA's priority is to open schools safely, safe for both employees and our students. Our members have been working for over a month with the Department of Education to develop some guidelines for the fall. WVEA leaders and staff have also been in dialogue with the the Department of Education staff, Superintendent Birch, and the administration to discuss concerns. Like you, we have many questions, and we've been pushing for the Department of Education for answers on a daily basis, and they've been giving us answers as quickly as they can. Everyone understands that across the nation and throughout our state, county school systems are facing different circumstances, both with the virus and the ability to reopen schools due to the various levels of staffing and resources. I think we all believe that the fall term for students may look very different from county to county. All the counties may not return in person. Some may start virtually, and others may have a mix of the two. And while schools may look very different depending on the location, there are certain things that must be constants in every location, and those are centered around the issues of safety and student learning. It is a given that equipment, required protocols, and space must be addressed in every plan, as well as delivering quality instruction to all students. The other thing that needs to be a constant is flexibility. Governor Justice threw out the date of September 8th as the start of school, and then he said in Monday's press conference that if circumstances of today still exist, schools could not start. So just like the spring, things are fluid, and what we know and think today could dramatically change in a week. Educators have always been flexible, but the pandemic takes the need for flexibility to new heights. While we're all concerned about our health and safety and the health and safety of our loved ones, I know that people are at very different levels of comfort with the coronavirus. I also know that no answer is going to satisfy everyone based upon each individual's comfort level. I'm going to turn the call over to Superintendent Birch now. He's going to make a few statements, and then we're going to take questions. Remember to press 0 on your telephone keypad if you would like to ask a question, and a screener will get to you. I ask that everyone be respectful while on the call, and please be concise with your question. In other words, really ask questions and keep your statements to a minimum so we can get through as many of your questions as possible. So with that, I will now turn the call over to Superintendent Birch, and first let me thank you for coming and joining us with this Tele-Town Hall. Superintendent Birch.
Thank you, Dale Lee, and I really do appreciate you and your organization putting this on. You know that I will never shy away from an opportunity to talk to any of our stakeholders, whether it be parents, teachers, service personnel, administrators. I'm as concerned as anybody about the restart of school. So I do want to talk a little bit today before we get into questions of kind of where we are in the kind of state of the state, working hand in hand with not only Dale Lee and other leaders throughout the state, but also with our 55 district superintendents and the governor's office. I appreciate the words of this is fluid, and we're all looking toward this September 8th target date. And I will continue to use that as just that, a target date. It's a date that the governor has put in place that we're looking forward to. It's a date that we're all trying to be very optimistic that we can have children, staff, our teachers back into our schools safely. But as Mr. Lee said, if the governor does not feel it is safe, there could be communities or districts that will not open if the numbers are not level. So I want to go back prior to the pandemic, and I want to talk a little bit before we all learned of what COVID-19 was. This time last year, we were gearing up for the 2019-20 school year. We were having discussions about the crisis that West Virginia is in. That crisis entering the 2019-20 school year included nearly 7,000 children in foster care, 55 out of 100,000 drug-related deaths in the state of West Virginia, leading the nation. Over 50 per 1,000 live birth rates born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. 19% poverty rate, fourth highest in the country prior to the pandemic. Almost 11,000 students identified as homeless prior to the pandemic. When March 13th hit, we fortunately had a governor, fortunately had leaders, and we fortunately had each one of you out there in the field that understood immediately the needs of these children. We knew without the support of the school system on March 13th, these children had to be fed, and somebody had to be that one caring adult looking out for these children. These statistics that I've said as we entered the 2019-20 school year did not go away with the pandemic. Instead, the pandemic has heightened the awareness of these statistics for the Department of Education and its partners. We know that in the last 5 months, many of these children have not had eyes on them. We know that these children have not been in a structured routine. We know that our teachers, as they get ready to come back and support these children, in September, we'll be dealing with children with quite an achievement gap, learning loss, children that will be coming to us with trauma, social and emotional issues from the environments that they potentially have been in for the last 5 months. We know that our referral rates for child protective services and our referral rates to shelters and homeless shelters has actually decreased. It's the lowest we've seen in 5 to 6 years. And that is quite a signal that we do not have adults with eyes on all of these children. While many of our parents and our teachers understand that many of our children would do just fine in virtual or alternative learning models, but for the statistics that I just discussed and those children, school is the one safe place they have. So the question is often posed to me, Clayton, how do you weigh the risk of opening schools versus the threat of COVID? I've not been shied. I'm not shied away from the answer is we must open schools. The risk for these children is so much greater, and we're going to have to find a way to get them back into a safe and structured environment. But we will not do that, and we'll not compromise that safe and structured environment if it's not safe for all. So we'll be working with Clay Marsh, Department of Health and Human Resources, as we get closer and closer to the September 8th start date. And what we'll be working with them on is what are the metrics? What are we looking for a community to be at a certain level of cases that makes it safe and we feel safe going back? If you live in a very rural area with no cases, it may look very different coming back to school than if you're in Monongalia County right now. The track that Monongalia County is on, unless things change drastically, we're very concerned that we're going to have to think about a remote or emergency state of education there. And we hope that that's not the case. But we called, and every week we have a call with the 55 superintendents. So a lot of the questions and stuff that I think we'll probably discuss today are the same questions that those superintendents ask, and they look to us for those answers. And I think Dale Lee said it best when he said, you know, we get the answers as fast as we can. We work hand in hand with the governor and his staff and legislators, And we know that this school year, just like the end of last school year, will look very, very different. Until there's a vaccine, until there's a time in the near future that we can get back to some sense of normal, it just won't be. The guidance documents that we've released are online. The toolkits we're asking the counties to utilize. They will have a deadline of August 14th that they'll be submitting their plans to the State Department of Education. Those plans we are looking for, again, I can kind of tell that apparently Dale Lee is quite the partner. One of the words that he used was flexible. We're actually going to be looking for those plans to be as flexible as possible. We have staff, we have employees, we have families that are all going to have a lot of different needs. Some will be ready and able to tackle virtual learning. Some will require the in-person learning. We have special needs. We have children that will need to be fed and take advantage of our breakfast and lunches. We have teachers that may have immune deficiency, health ailments that need to be considered. We have experienced teachers that absolutely may be looking at other ways that they can engage their children and be part of the education system without potentially being in a classroom full of children. There's going to be a lot of flexibility that we're going to ask the districts to look at, everything from transportation to cafeteria meals to the day-to-day instruction. We know that we have gaps since March 13th. Two of the largest gaps, one you just heard me discuss, which is the social, emotional, mental health, and wellness of our students. We are pretty sure that has been exacerbated over the course of this pandemic. Secondly, though, we have lessons learned from the remote learning time. We found that nearly half of our children do not have access to the internet. Even if they do, the access could be poor quality to where it's actually frustrating to engage and interact with their instructors and support staff virtually. We saw the same thing in higher education. Dr. Sarah Tucker has been discussing that even in higher education, many of her faculty and over half of the students in higher education do not have high-quality broadband access in their homes, which even for our college students made it very difficult for them to participate in any type of remote learning toward the end of the spring semester. We're looking at those as well as other issues as we head into September 8th. We know that for the last 100 years, we've talked about public education being the great equalizer. And I've always believed that public education is indeed the great equalizer until the pandemic hit. If we continue to expect learning to take place out of the brick and mortars, if we continue to ask that learning take place into our children's homes, then we have to solve these issues of equity. All children must have access to high-quality internet. They must have access to social and emotional supports, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their income. So, Mr. Lee, with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Superintendent Birch. And before we go to the first question, I'm going to remind you once again to press 0 if you have a question. And so the first one in the queue is Harold Smith. We will unmute you, Harold now, and you can state your question. Harold Smith from Dow County.
Teachers would like to know, and service personnel, are their salaries in jeopardy if they do not return to school this school session?
Dale, would you like to take that?
You go ahead.
Okay, yes, sir. I absolutely think that you need to be concerned. Simply not reporting to work and not doing our job absolutely could put salaries in jeopardy. However, if we're talking about the reason for not doing that is because of a health ailment or truly an immune deficiency, and again, asking the districts to be flexible. We know we're going to have a shortage of folks who can assist with virtual education. I think each and every one of our service personnel and teachers can find ways to engage and be part of the solution. But simply not returning to work, I just don't understand or know how we can ensure salaries can stay intact.
But I also think, Superintendent Birch, that if this start date gets delayed even a little longer, we will do something virtually where educators will be paid and will be involved with their students. Is that correct?
Dale, you are absolutely correct on that. Pushing start dates will not impact our teachers or service personnel. They are a 200-day employee, and we will make sure that there is no loss of pay or salary. I know that with the change in calendars, we have several that are concerned about even sometimes a gap in the pay. And we're actually working very diligently with the governor's office to ensure that we can close that gap and actually not have any delays in pay for our teachers and service personnel.
Okay, thank you. The second question is Rhonda Johnson from Monongalia County. Rhonda, we're unmuting you now.
Yes, I have a question. I have a 6-year-old grandson who will be attending first grade this year, and I was wondering how you're going to be able to keep the mask on the younger children to prevent spread of COVID.
So, Rhonda, thank you. Right now, the mask requirements are for 9 years and older. We will encourage those younger, if they can wear them, to wear them. However, we will not require throughout the entire school day those younger children to be in masks. One, being a early childhood teacher myself, it's very, very difficult to keep them in it, let alone keep them from touching it and touching everything else. So we are going to instead be focusing on core groups of children. One of the things we've worked with the state health officials is ensuring that our youngest learners are not interacting with the entire school as little as possible, staying within their core group, continuing to be monitored. With the influx of children that are shifting to virtual school too, we believe the footprint within the schools will be smaller than we've seen in the past. But we'll be working with our teachers as we do trainings both for virtual and in person of how to set up classrooms, how to ensure the materials that we are used to sharing in those especially younger grades is not shared and contained into isolated individual materials also.
Next question is going to come from Jackie Schreiner in Ohio County. Jackie, you're now unmuted and ask your question.
Hello, I am Jackie Schreiner. I'm a 23-year teacher at Wheeling Park High School. I am also a 61-year-old diabetic with asthma and an autoimmune disorder and a low white blood cell count. I don't feel that it's safe for me to go into a classroom that is poorly ventilated with students in masks until there's a vaccine. So my question is, what options, and you've hit upon a little bit, but there's no clear answer yet. What options is the Department of Education and the West Virginia Education Association going to push the mandate for these options so that I can actually work? I love my job. I can't imagine not teaching.
Okay, Clayton.
Well, thank you, Dale. So, Jackie, first and foremost, 23 years of service to the children of West Virginia. Thank you. So let's start with some of those options I discussed. Jackie, you fall into that category, and if you don't mind me using your personally as an example, that's where we're asking the districts to look at a couple flexibilities. One is, are there options for you to engage with children safely? Driven by, we're going to have teachers who are going to come back with medical doctors. Got a little background noise there. All right. So we have teachers that are going to be coming back. We're saying, we've told the superintendents that, yes, you need to be working with teachers who are coming back with those medical documentation to say, listen, I am immune deficient. I do have these issues. What are the options for them? Is there opportunities for you to work and help us with the virtual schools? Most of my veteran teachers who have contacted me that have health ailments, they're really concerned about not having the interaction with their students. And I hear that over and over and over. So we're looking at how do we expand the ideas around virtual school to where it's not the old-fashioned virtual school, but different ways. And my general counsel is sitting here writing frantically. So would you like to add to my answer?
Okay. We've been speaking to our district superintendent. If teachers have medical issues, you're going to need to work with your healthcare providers to get documentation of those medical conditions to your counties so that your district personnel offices, your building principals can have that medical documentation in place to determine how to create an environment that is safe for you. That may be a different placement in the classroom, different placement in a building, but it's going to be driven by the information that is provided by your healthcare provider, your physician, as documented and given to your county office to work through on a case-by-case basis. Start that process as early as possible. Get that information to your counties so as they're putting schedules together this year, we can start engaging in those conversations prior to the time that students and teachers are expected to be in the buildings.
And Jackie, to answer what WVEA is doing, we have consistently, from day one, said that we're going to ensure the safety of our educators and our students. Us and WVEA recommended that they get the documentation from their physician to say that these are accommodations that have to be in place for them to be able to safely do their job. And as you heard Superintendent Birch and Heather say, the documentation, we're going to work with people to make sure that they are in the best possible way to help their students. Next question is coming from Patty Cooper from Berkeley. Patty, you're now unmuted.
Hi, this is Patty Cooper from Berkeley County. My question is, if or when we have a confirmed case of COVID in a school, what procedure will we follow? There is guidance in the April document on the CDC website. I wondered if we would follow that, or is there something directly from the state that we would follow, or is it going to be a county-by-county decision in what would happen as far as notification, leaving the school, how it will be cleaned, those types of things? Thank you.
Patty, great question. Right now in our in the actual toolkit on page 9, there's some outlining guidance on the processes of an identified case. What we're asking the Department of Health and Human Resources to do is actually help us create a checklist, because what happens oftentimes is that 55 local county health departments may tackle things differently, and that makes it difficult. So we're asking them to work with us on both confirmed cases and the process for removing the individual, doing any tracing that's required, but there's also suspected cases that has not been confirmed yet and has a set of criteria also. So there's actually going to be a checklist that will be out of page 9 in the toolkit, and it will go a little more in-depth for each of the counties of whether it be a classroom or a school, depending on the exposure, and then also the requirements for cleaning that facility prior to others' injuries.
Great. Background noise, feedback, and speakerphone, so if you can get closer to the phone, that will probably help. Stacy Schwartzmiller from Hancock County.
Hi. My question is, how are you expect students to leave their classroom to be mainstreamed into the general education classroom if students are expected to remain in their classrooms all day?
Stacy, do you mind repeating that?
Sure. Special education students who are in their restrictive environments all day, how are they going to be expected to mainstream into the general education classroom if they are to be in one classroom all day?
Sure. So we're actually going to be looking at special education. Let's talk about elementary first. For our children that we are going to try as best as possible to have them assigned to a core group, Susan Beck in the Office of Special Education is working on guidelines for that now. I will tell you that when it gets into grades 6 through 12, it becomes a little more difficult because of not only the children switching classes, but also the in and outs for some of the rec services that these children receive. But for elementary school, Susan Beck is working on guidance now of when possible, How do you identify the core group they stay within, and what's the supports they need within that classroom? Heather, anything else for that? Okay.
Okay, thank you. The next question is coming from Wendy Peters in Raleigh County. Wendy, you're now unmuted.
Okay.
Question.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was just had a question about testing. What will we do about statewide testing at the end of the year? Will we have a waiver or do something like we did this past year?
Well, Wendy, thank you. And I want to be as honest and transparent with you as possible. And I actually got asked this question by a group of parents on a recent call. And my answer was a little flippant, and I didn't really mean for it to be. To be quite honest, I've never even considered anything around testing because I'm so focused on what return to school looks like. I do know that the U.S. Department of Education has engaged the state superintendents in a conversation more around accountability than really testing. So we're actually looking at, with the State Board of Education, release on accountability metrics because things like attendance, we're going to be dealing with behavior issues. We know that we're going to have an achievement gap. So it's really been more of a conversation around asking to be waived from accountability, but we've not really had any discussions around statewide testing. At some point in time, we will need a new baseline to know what we're dealing with. We're hearing stories from partners who have, for example, Katrina in Florida. It took them 2 to 3 years to create a new baseline. It was quite an undertaking. But as soon as I know more about testing, I will let the public know through the State Board of Education. But right now, I am working on flexibility or complete waiver on accountability.
Next question comes from Jane Bowers from Marion County. Jane, you're now unmuted.
Hi, my question has to do with high schoolers and the attendance policy. In our county, we have the attendance policy. If the kids miss 5 days, they have to take semester tests, and if they miss more than 10 days, they have to take comprehension tests. Is the attendance policy for testing going to be waived with all of the COVID-19 issues right now?
Yeah, Jane, Marion County, yes. The attendance policies, such as you referred to be honest with you, the North County policies, it's something your county should be looking at and how they're going to tackle. They're also going to have to decide in each and every county when they talk about their attendance policy if there's suspected cases, if a child is shows any of the symptoms but is able to do remote learning. Are we counting them absent or are they still engaged? I know that our general counsel has been having conversations with the district leaders so that they're thinking about their attendance policies because we're not going to be able to track attendance as we did in the past. It's just not going to be possible for asking for all this flexibility for both staff and students.
Our next question is going to come from Jay O'Neill in Kanawha County. Jay, you're unmuted.
Yeah, we're learning that COVID is spread by aerosols. So how will we maintain air quality and good circulation in buildings that recycle classroom air and don't pull from the outside? And what about in classrooms that have windows that do not open?
We have, Mr. O'Neill, we have a water and air filtration piece that our HVAC guys are starting to work with the counties. We actually have other concerns, too. Please be aware, we've asked everybody when you open these buildings, many of them are having water issues, so we don't want to forget that. These buildings have been closed. There are guidelines around the heating and air ventilation systems to keep circulation. Classrooms that do not have windows that open, we actually have folks, HVAC, we keep 4 full-time employed. Counties have already requested assistance from them to come out and do walkthroughs and to look at their facilities prior to opening to make sure what's working, what's not, and is there any modifications needed. So if you have buildings that any concern on air quality or the HVAC system filtration, please contact the Office of Facilities here at the Department of Education, and they can assign one of our folks to come out and do that walkthrough with district leadership.
Josh Weekly from Wetzel County. Josh?
First, thank you. My question is regarding, a lot of West Virginians right now still think that this whole thing's a hoax and are refusing to follow the governor's orders on masks. That will certainly transpire to our students coming into the building. What will we do? How will we treat it? If a student would intentionally cough or do things that would be conducive to spreading this COVID-19, will that be considered assault? If somebody wants to cough in your face, for instance, how will we handle that? What directive our county is being, how to treat that?
Well, that is a very, very interesting question. Prior to our guidance going out and the toolkit going out, masks were quite the conversation piece. My staff looking at me all shaking their head, yes. So the current guidance requires masks in non-congregate areas. It requires them in even for transportation. I understand that is going to be controversial. I've had my share of parents that have called here very upset that we would require that. But right now, the governor's orders are that we wear masks. So district leadership will have to consider what are the consequences for refusal to wear masks, and that's entering or exiting a bus or entering the building itself. While in the building, especially older students that would refuse masks, I think is something the district leadership is going to have to consider. Heather, anything to add to that?
No, nothing specifically. I do think that that's an issue. Again, we keep, all of these issues are issues that we've never faced before, and we're certainly hoping that our students will take this seriously, and that fellow students will encourage them to take it seriously, and we can create a culture where the school values the safety of others. But if the student refuses, then that student may need to be put in the school for the parent contact. Have to work with those on a case-by-case basis. I keep saying that a lot, and I apologize for doing so, but that could be an issue that is a disciplinary issue at the school level.
Wait, before I get to the next question again, there's a lot of background noise with your stuff, and I'm not sure. Heard Heather.
I'll pull her closer, Dale, but I'm trying to keep her 6 feet from me.
Next question is from Laura Hudson from Kanawha County. Laura, you're now unmuted.
Hello. My question is, as a kindergarten teacher, our students are very social, and we have a big part of our day that, they play together. And I was just wondering about what we are to do with all the toys in our classrooms, such as kitchen station and the blocks and puzzles and those kinds of things.
Laura, that's a great question. And once again, with my background being early childhood, I know exactly what you're talking about. Those are essential to the learning, essential to the development. So we've actually worked with WVU and Clay Marsh. They understand that our pre-K through potentially second grade classrooms that do a lot more blended hands-on learning, a lot more play-based curriculum. They actually understand that that is something that is essential to young learners. So there will be guidance on some additional requirements for keeping some of those materials wiped down and cleaned daily, especially high touch. But one of the parts that's very difficult is there's also going to be some guidance on things such as art supplies that we no longer share potentially and have to have our own. I think it's difficult for the young learners. Those are also they're not real It's just something that we as early childhood teachers are not used to either. I think it's going to be very difficult.
County, Ted, you're now on mute.
Ted Dixon, Fayette County. I'd like to ask this question looking into the future. October is usually the month that we do our child count, which bases our funding for the next year. I've noticed that at my school we have about 700 students. Many report cards that we mailed out have been returned. They've moved on, and I'm afraid that when October comes, or if we do it in November, our numbers would be down, and then the following year we would receive less funding for those children. And this may asking you, maybe could the state just do a 2.5%, if the numbers are down, do a 2.5% decrease in the numbers instead of a radical loss of students and the school system being short money?
Ted, great question. Unfortunately, if the students that are leaving our schools, we can't capture them, we will lose money. The authorities to increase change the state aid. However, we are going to make a major push in campaign because in 2017, legislation passed that all children that we enroll in virtual school, and if they attend full-time virtual school, even as a homeschool student, the county gives the funding for those students. So one of the things we're working with the district leadership on is ensuring that any family who is not sure if they want their children to come back in person, to make sure they know there's an opportunity for them to enroll virtually so we can keep them in the enrollment at the public school and continue receiving those funds.
Okay, the next question is going to come from Nancy Hall, Wayne County. Nancy?
Hi, I'm a special educator in Wayne County for middle school, grades 6 through 8. And I'm concerned if we do not go back into the classroom and students continue distance learning, how will those students with IEPs get the support and accommodations that they require at home? Is there currently a plan that you're working on to accommodate those students?
Nancy, first and foremost, middle school special education, God bless you. And thank you. I got to spend quite some time living in Wayne County. So, Nancy, the special education, you know as well as anybody, during the triage period of March 13th through the end of the school year, there was no shift, there was no movement on any type of waivers from the U.S. Department of Education on delivery of services for children with special needs. We also found that through the remote learning, it was almost impossible in some cases to deliver those services. That is why getting these children back in school is so essential. Even if we have to go back in some areas to a remote learning model, if the numbers are high, we're asking Susan Beck in the Office of Special Education to be looking at alternative ways to serve these children. Many of our special education teachers have reached out to us over the summer. They are very concerned that if they have to resort back to remote learning, these children simply are not being served. And for many of these teachers, it's not a matter of meeting or not meeting the IEP. It's simply a matter of these children must have assistance. So we will be looking at some alternative ways that we can offer services, even if we have to shift to remote. So each of the counties, when they submit their plans back to us, they have to have some contingency plans working with our Office of Special Education on how we can work with those families for direct services.
Florence County, Ann, you're now unmuted.
Yes. Okay, I am a kindergarten teacher in Jefferson County, and can you explain how the students and staff under grade 3 will be kept safe when masks of those required?
And working with Dr. March and the officials, they did decide under the grade 9, you are correct, that they would not require masks for our youngest learners for a variety of reasons, which is why they are asking for those children to receive core groups. And when we say core groups, that's throughout the day. Once they attend your classroom, they're to stay with that classroom throughout the day. They should not be interacting with other classes for recess, lunch. special classes, anything. It should be with their core class throughout the entire day. It makes it a lot more efficient to monitor those young learners, as well as screen. But we have worked with health officials and not really wanted to go down the route of asking those young learners to wear masks. Again, for a lot of reasons, I'm sure you understand. Many are just because they tend to touch their face more instead of less.
Question, Craig in Ohio County, now unmuted.
Yeah, this is Jenny Craig. I'm a special ed teacher in Ohio County, also the local president in Ohio County. A vast majority of the concerns that I continue to hear from members is a concern with allowing counties the individual autonomy to make their own plans and carry them out. Also, in the most recently released toolkit, verbiage such as, if possible, as much as possible, if available, recommended, is little to actually hold counties accountable to adhering to CDC guidelines and best practices. So how can we ensure, if we're allowing individual counties the autonomy to decide whether they have a full-time nurse in each building, daily temperature checks, spacing, class sizes, and protection of vulnerable staff, how can we ensure that we're going to have best practices in place if counties are given the autonomy to do that and we don't have real strict and stringent statewide mandates?
Okay, Jenny. Well, first and foremost, I wish there was an easier answer to that other than, we have 55 mostly elected education. We have 55 independent systems in the state of West Virginia. The toolkit does have requirements that will have to be included. However, there are a lot of recommendations in there. Not every community is going to be the same. We have no expectation that it is going to be one size fits all. So if you live in McDowell County and you have absolutely 0 cases, then your return to school may look very, very differently than Berkeley County. And that is actually part of the reentry toolkit. The way it was designed was to allow for that flexibility. I understand that we will have districts that will want to potentially alter or change their plan and not follow certain things. Up until last week, the toolkit was there for them to build their own plans, but after meeting with the governor, each of those districts will be submitting their plans to the State Department of Education. So all 55 districts will have to address certain requirements based on the toolkit.
Next question is going to come from Kim in Ohio County. Kim?
Hi, I was just wondering if we go back to school full-time and a teacher comes down with COVID or has to quarantine for 14 days, will we be required to use sick days?
Popular question. Please.
Thanks. This is Heather answering the question, and I hope that I have interference on the speaker at this point. At this point, our direction is yes, that is a use of sick leave. Now, there are also some additional, in case we've talked before about some concerns about having adequate sick leave. There are some expanded sick leave provisions under the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act that allow employees up to 80 hours of sick leave. So if you're in a situation where you feel that you don't have enough, there is some additional relief under the federal act. But a diagnosis of COVID and not reporting to work because of that would indicate that the teacher is going to be using sick leave. Teachers, service personnel, principals, that's going to apply equally throughout the county.
Question is from Lynn Reynolds in Kanawha. Lynn?
Hi, this is Lynn Reynolds from Kanawha County. In Dr. Birch's opening statement, he said that we would be provided with some training for online learning and that type of thing. I am a 22-year veteran teacher, and I'm a first grade teacher, and we are notoriously planners. and I just feel like I'm starting to panic because I don't think I'm going to have enough time to get myself prepared for this. And I was wondering if he could give us a timeline for when those trainings will happen. I know that counties have to have their plans into them by August the 14th, but if we go back to work around August the 24th or 25th, that's 10 days. So I was just kind of wondering if we could get some clarification on when those trainings will happen.
Lynn, first of all, I understand first grade teachers, and you. I love that you opened up with you're quite the planner. So I agree. I have said over and over again that I believe that our teachers, unlike any other year, planning for returning to this year, I find to be quite difficult for a lot of reasons. One, you're coming back and you're hoping that you're planning, and I hope this is the case for you, Lynn, you're hoping that you're planning for the in-person. You're hoping that you have your students with you. So you already know that planning for those students, you already have such time that's going to have to be devoted to what's the learning loss, where's my new starting point for these students coming back to me, what's the social, emotional, and trauma I'm going to be looking for. So here you are planning for the return of students, but simultaneously you have to prepare for what if it's remote, and am I ready to do remote or virtual type learning, and I think that's really difficult. So we've asked that I know the counties, and I appreciate that they'll offer a lot of trainings. We're asking the counties to please front load time prior to September 8th for their teachers. But I will tell you that August 3rd through the 7th, there is a registration link in the, it should be in your K-12 email. There's going to be a lot of trainings out of the Department of Education on beginners, a beginner's guide to online learning or remote distance learning, if you will. There's how to identify and support children socially and emotionally. I'm hearing that a lot of those trainings, last count this morning was around 9,000 teachers have enrolled. If they fill up, I've already committed to the 55 superintendents that we will do a full repeat of those trainings. Somebody might want to tell Jan Bart that. We will do a full repeat of those trainings because I think we have many, many teachers like you that are going to be very, very prepared regardless of the mode of delivery. Oh, and one more thing. I'm sorry, Dale. Each one of those also is recorded, and we're going to be posting each one of those trainings online so that if you attend, you can go back and actually see the presentations and the trainings. So we'll, Dale, I will try to get information to you directly on those trainings.
Okay, our next question is going to go from Jody Cullers from Grant County. Jody?
Hi, yes, my name is Jody Cullers from Grant County. My question is on the virtual learning process. I was curious to know if you had a plan in place for those students that don't have the equipment or that have poor internet service to keep them from falling behind, because I know that was a situation at the end of the school year last year.
Jody, thank you. That is actually something I probably should have opened up with, talking about what's happening in the state of the state. I know that in the opening you heard me say that there was quite a gap in those that have and those who have not when it comes to the internet access. So yes, the governor, Chancellor Tucker, and myself are actually in meetings with various, both those that want to expand broadband and those that want to look at alternative ways to get children access. One of the examples, and I know this will not work for the entire state, but I will tell you one of the examples we're looking at is actually out of Jefferson County. Jefferson County has found that through relationship through Sprint and T-Mobile, they're actually able to put Wi-Fi devices in children's homes, and for a very, very low cost of $10 a month, unlimited data for those children. Now, we're actually looking to expand that for all providers in the state. I have dollars that I've asked to be emptied out of the Department of Education. I want no dollars staying here, and we have told the districts they have about $79 million in CARES funding. I'm putting up another $15 to $17 million emptying the Department of Education's accounts, and a lot of those dollars are going to technology access. We're looking at around 30 to 40,000 children that we're hoping we can expand access to. But more importantly is getting Senator Manchin, Senator Capito, and the governor to talk about what happened during the pandemic. And if you live in a Grant County or a Pocahontas County or any county that lacks that access, it is essential, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's an emergency that these families get access as soon as possible.
We're going to do two more questions. The first one is from a in Maine.
Hi, my question, and I'm not even sure that there's a good answer for it, but one of the issues that we see during flu season is that parents will medicate their child in the morning, send them to school, and then at lunchtime they come back and they feel miserable and they have a fever of 103 and they say, oh, well, my mom gave me medicine and told me to suck it up till lunch. Is there anything that we can put into place to kind of deter that from happening?
Wow, what a great question. So I know this is going to be tough, and I 100% agree with you on the issues we've seen during flu and cold season. I'll give an example of something we heard of that is just, as far as I'm concerned, I couldn't believe that the story made it to me. We actually have a case of these practices for sports of a parent of a high school student medicating heavily to avoid showing up on the screenings for fevers. And lo and behold, the child tested positive for COVID. And the individual who did the inspection. I just can't believe that parents do this, and it's just something that during this time period is unbelievable. However, we are going to be putting in, we're going to be printing 25,000 posters. One of the things we're asking the districts to do is adopt what they will see on the screenings for these posters. In the past, of course, if you didn't feel well, maybe you had an ache or a fever, your parent would give you medicine and actually send you to school. The new screening protocols we're looking at is basically fever, chills, shortness of breath, a new cough, any symptom whatsoever is an immediate stay home. And I really, really hope that the school superintendents, principals, our school nurses take that very, very serious.
Now to our last question, and those of you that are still in the queue and are getting screened on that, we will get the questions, we'll transcribe them, and we'll get them to Clayton. Osborne from Greenbrier County, you're now unmuted.
Hi, thank you for your time. My question is about safety on the school buses. It seems like we can have any number of safety measures in place at schools, but it kind of is out the window when the kids are on buses if they're not able to socially distance. Can you speak to that too?
So the last question gets to be a question on transportation. So my staff's looking at me going, well, here we go. Transportation, so let's start with the original recommendations from the CDC. Most of the states in the nation, in fact, all states in the nation, nobody could meet the original recommendations from the CDC for transportation. It was absolutely, it just couldn't be done. So we gathered our health officials, asked them for ways that they thought it could be safe to transport children. We know that a bus operator has a very tough job loading, unloading children. So we right now are working with Joe White and some others to do some videos on what we expect from the buses this year. One of the decisions that was very, very tough for the Department of Health Human Resources was on the mask requirements. Masks will be required on buses. They will be limited to 2 to a seat, facing forward, windows down when possible, sitting with siblings when possible, sitting with similar groups from their core neighborhoods when possible. Transportation probably during a period of time when this was being put together probably took up most of the conversation. Not just that, there's also now new requirements for daily cleaning of those buses prior to every run. as well as weekly cleanings of those buses. So I would anticipate that as we draw closer to September 8th, we definitely could see more instructions coming or more support coming for transportation.
All right. I want to thank Superintendent Birch and all of you and Heather for being on the call. I'm sorry that time did not permit us to answer every question or get every question asked, but I want you to remember to hang on until the end and leave your question on the voicemail. We will listen to those and get them to Superintendent Birch. Also, I want to let you know that we have just finished a scientific survey regarding the fall school term done for us by a polling firm out of Washington, D.C. Each of you should be receiving an email in the next week with a link to take the survey. We will be sending out reminders of that next week and let you know when the survey is live. I also want to thank you again, and I hope you found this call to be informative. I'll let you know that this call was recorded, and it will be posted on our Dedicated Teachers website. Thank you again for all your questions. I hope some of your questions have been answered. I know you still have many questions out there. Again, I want to thank all of you for being on the call, and I want you to stay safe. Thank you all. Goodbye.